First, you learn to read, then you read to learn. But if you don't learn to read by third grade,
All hope lost?
then it's easy to tell when your car needs gas because you got the little indicator thing. But how do you tell when a student needs to be referred for intervention? And then I'm gonna answer a subscriber question that asks about how to find the thing that sets you apart from every other teacher, all on this episode of New Teacher, Big Impact, the podcast. Impact begins now. Welcome to New Teacher Big Impact, the podcast. I am former terrible teacher turned two-time teacher of the year, Daryl Williams Jr. And we are getting started today with our warning bell, which you know is our segment that we look at something that is happening in education. The articles sponsored by or provided by Ed Weekly, where we are going to talk about something that's happening in education. And today we're talking about reading interventions for older students that might be missing the mark and how that impacts every single teacher listening. So we're going to talk about that in a second, but right before we get into it, I want to remind you of our sponsor of this season, that is Impact. And Impact is exactly what you've been looking for your educational journey. It's the way to master skills that you need to improve the efficacy in your classroom, as well as surrounding yourself with supportive individuals, as well as making small investments, but to have a huge gain. That is what Impact and Impact Community is all about. We support one another, we teach one another, we coach one another, we help one another on our educational journey, and that is something that you definitely want to be a part of. The link is in the description below, and we just recently had a subscriber only meetup, and that is honestly my favorite time of the week, where we sit down, we get together on Zoom, ask questions, have a good time, celebrate wins, and share the things that we have been learning and how we're implementing them in our classroom and the difference that we're making in students' lives. That's what it's all about. I hope that I can see you there. The link is in the description below, again, for you to get started with Impact today. Looking at our article this week, I'm a math teacher, former math teacher, but I will definitely say, current administrator, former math teacher, I will definitely say that reading is fundamental, which is why I'm saying that this article is for every teacher listening. Again, reading interventions for older students may be the missing component. What does that mean? All right, so I gave you the adage earlier. First, students learn to read, then they read to learn, meaning that once you understand how to read, you now can apply the things that you learned reading to other subjects and other areas, which is why I say that reading is at the foundation. So does that mean that if they don't learn how to read, that they don't learn how to learn well, right? Because if somebody, that's why reading is so important. If somebody doesn't learn how to read effectively and comprehend and understand words and learn vocabulary, then how are they going to apply that in any situation, even outside of school? So a recent study from ETS, which is the testing program that some of you are way too familiar with. I know I was. Testing is not my favorite thing, but the testing organization ETS has completed this study. And they collaborated with the Advanced Research Development Fund. And it shows that more than 20% of 5th to 7th grade students fell below the decoding threshold. More than 20% of 5th to 7th grade students fell below the decoding threshold. What is the decoding threshold? That is the baseline ability to sound out words that the students need in order to make good progress on literary skills. So basically, students are struggling to sound out words and understand what that word even is. We're not even talking about comprehension or defining. We're talking about literally saying that word. So students are struggling to sound out words effectively so that they can identify what that word is. Now, if you think about that, and we're talking word by word. So if we think about that in some sort of a passage, if students are reading a passage, or if students are reading directions, or if students are reading a problem, and there are a couple of words in there that they can't even identify, how are they going to comprehend the entire passage? How are they going to comprehend the whole problem, right? Like, how are they going to comprehend the whole thing if there are bits and pieces of words or little words within that passage that they can't even identify? And when we think about it, it's not terrible. 20%, okay, it's not the end of the world. It's not like it's everybody. And this 20%, that's what RTI is for, right? You know, we've been talking about RTI for the last 2 weeks now, or how to support diverse learners, and we're gonna continue talking about it in the teacher toolbox today. But somebody's saying, okay, it's 20%. How are we supporting that 20%? They can go to interventions. Okay, but watch this. Literacy interventions, and for my English teachers, you know this, literacy interventions after 3rd grade are focused on comprehension and not phonics. Intervention for phonics is just in kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade, I want to say. After grade 3, their foundational literary skills or their foundational literacy skills are not tested, and they're barely addressed. Because the assumption there is that by 3rd grade, students have mastered phonics. So after 3rd grade, the intervention is focused on comprehension. And if you notice that in your career or as an educator, let us know in the comment section down below, because I've always taught middle school, and I'm reading this article, and I've an administrator at a K-8 school, and yeah, when we talk about interventions, they always say phonics that's kindergarten, 1st, 2nd grade, right? So we're not seeing phonics at all after 3rd grade. And so the article goes on to talk about how struggling students need strategic, systematic solutions. Because if you think about it, students that can't read independently, meaning I'm not identifying these words the way that I'm supposed to identify them, I can't see these words. Students that are not reading independently, they struggle to do work on their own. So how are they going to be successful in school, right? The cool thing is, I find that this is cool. The cool thing is they also surveyed and found that there's a higher percentage of teachers going rogue than I thought. Meaning going rogue and saying, these students need phonics, we're going to teach them phonics anyway. So over a quarter of teachers, over 25% of teachers that were surveyed said, yeah, I know that we're not supposed to teach phonics after 3rd grade, but they need it, so I'm teaching it to them anyway. And I think that that's kind of cool. And I'm gonna talk more about that in a second. I think it's kind of cool that their teachers are saying these are what students need. Remember, good teachers teach subjects, great teachers teach students. These great teachers are saying this is what students need, and I'm gonna make sure that the students get it, whether it's through my small group or through whatever it is. But the complaint is that because as a nation, we just assume that students know phonics by 3rd grade, there are not a lot of resources to teach phonics to older students. So if you have a 7th, 8th grade student that is struggling with phonics, and I look for phonics resources, it's gonna be like a little kid, Minnie Mouse butterflower themed worksheet that is like, right? And what they're saying is there's not a lot of resources that are out there that teachers can find to be able to have these small group type interventions with students that are still struggling with phonics. So that is kind of the systemic problem that people are complaining about. And for me, I think that this makes too much sense. Sometimes here's my reaction. Sometimes things make too much sense. It makes too much sense to just give students the thing that they need. Sometimes in education, we just always have to complicate things, right? And I'm going to try to stay off of my soapbox here. I'm looking at the time. I'm trying to stay off my soapbox here. But sometimes, as in education, in order to try to simplify things, we overcomplicate things. So somebody somewhere or some committee somewhere decided that, yeah, after 3rd grade, they don't need phonics anymore. They should have gotten it. So we're going to provide intervention for comprehension. Because in their brain, they were thinking you get phonics first, boom. Once you understand words, you get comprehension next, boom. Once you understand that, you know what I'm saying? So I see the rationale. They were trying to simplify it. But let's not complicate it. What if you have a 3rd, 4th grade student that didn't master phonics? They just missed out? That's just it? Teacher has to go rogue, create your own resources? So that's where I say sometimes it just makes too much sense. How about we give students the things that they need, regardless of age, regardless of grade level, what are the gaps that need closing, and can we close those gaps for the students that are in our classrooms? That's the question that I have, and I don't know why it's so hard for that to be the case. But what I want to say to the community members and those that are listening here now, all my educators, what does that mean for educators? It means sometimes you gotta go a little rogue. Sometimes you gotta go a little rogue in the name of student success. And I just wanna say it like this, there's never been a trailblazer that hasn't ruffled some feathers. But if you wanna blaze a trail, right? If you wanna make a difference, if you wanna make this impact that we're talking about, listen to me closely because I don't want to say something wrong. If you want to blaze this trail, it's not going to come as a result of following all the rules to a T. It's not going to be as a result of playing in the system exactly as it was built. As we know, the system could be broken. As you know, the rules can be flawed. But a trailblazer is one who says, I see this need, I see this gap, and I'm going to fill it for my students. And it's okay to ruffle a couple of feathers in the name of student success. So for the 25% of teachers that are saying, I'm going rogue and I'm teaching my students the phonics skills because that is what they need, and I'm teaching that in my small group intervention, I want to see what their data looks like. I want to see how students are performing as a result. I want to see what is happening in those 25% of classrooms. And for those other teachers that are saying, it's not customary to teach phonics after third grade and I'm just going to follow the rules, what do your students need? What do your students need? And how can we get students the things that they need while still sticking to the standards, right? While still focus on grade level instruction? How do we incorporate both? That's what master teachers do, and that'll be a long time for me to try to answer that question, but I just want to plant the seed right now. Is that okay? I just want to plant the seed in your mind because somebody is hearing this and thinking, here's a seed that I want to plant. Sometimes you got to go a little rogue in the name of student success. Not to jeopardize student safety, right? Not to harm students, not for self-gain and self-gratification, but sometimes it's okay to go a little rogue in the name of student success because that's how we blaze a trail and that's how we make change. All right? So that being said, that is our warning bell, and I think it blends nicely into our teacher toolbox, where I'm going to be teaching a principle that we are going to continue talking about how to support diverse learners. And this principle, when you master it, you're going to improve efficacy in your classroom, guaranteed. The teacher toolbox begins right after this.
Never underestimate your teaching. There's 1% that sets you apart from everybody else, and that 1% is how you're going to make your impact.
He was exciting, funny. He is just real.
This was like monumental.
If you view your 1% as if it's a deficiency, you'll operate as if it is. But if you view your 1% as if it's your amazing, you'll operate with confidence. And I need some more people as we step into this next school year to walk confidently knowing that your differences are not your deficiencies. Your differences are not your drawbacks. Your differences are not your downfalls. But when you let your differences live, that's when you can make a difference in students' lives. I can't wait to see these teachers enact their 1% amazing and make the difference that only they can. If you would like for your school district to be empowered as well, you can click the link down below and our team will reach out to you.
Welcome to the teacher toolbox, where we're going to help you master a specific principle that is going to lead to more success in your classroom. And as we're talking about, hey, sometimes you got to blaze a trail, and what that looks like is different in every classroom because every classroom is different. That's why we have RTI, because we have response to intervention, because students are so completely different. And for the last couple of weeks, we've been talking about how to support diverse learners, which is taken directly from the course Supporting Diverse Learners that lives inside of Impact. So if you want to understand how to support diverse learners, we're talking about IEPs, 504s, ELL students. We're talking about students that need a little bit of extra help, a little bit of extra guidance, students that are academically kind of seeing some gaps or behaviorally not meeting the expectations. If you want to understand that whole system and process, the course lives inside of Impact. The link is in the description below for you to get started for free today. And remember, right here, right now, we're diving into now module number 3 from that course, which is understanding the 3 different tiers of RTI. How do we even know how to move students along? Like the example I gave earlier, we know when it's time to get gas. The indicator flashes. My wife loves to test the limits, right? She doesn't have one of the cars that tells you how many miles to empty, like 30 miles to empty, 20 miles. She doesn't have that kind of car. She has a car that has like the little dial, and it flashes when it's time for gas. We learned that when it's time for gas, it'll start flashing like this, okay? The gas symbol will flash like this. She has found out that if you drive long enough with the gas pumping like this, with the gas light flashing like this, that eventually it'll start flashing like this. It'll go faster. Like, listen, no, you need gas now. And my question always is, why do we have to get to this point? Like, why do you need it to scream at you, to flash at you double time to let you know, no, really, you need gas? Anyway, it's easy to tell when it's time for you to get gas. Please, as soon as your light comes on, please go get some gas. I don't want anybody on the side of the road listening to this podcast. All right, listen to the podcast driving on your way to work, not on the side of the road because you ran out of gas. But how do you know when it's time for students to move from tier to tier to tier with response into RTI? Well, again, the goal is not to move students from tier 1 to tier 2 to tier 3 to evaluate for special education services. The goal is to give them the adequate support at the tier that they're on. That's what we talked about last week. But the reality of the situation is, although all 100% of students are involved in RTI, only 80 to 85% are really going to be in that tier 1. And that's a healthy number. So that still leaves 15 to 20% of students that are going to be sprinkled throughout tier 2, tier 3 interventions and special education services, right? So that being said, there has to be some sort of indicator. There has to be some sort of way of us knowing how to move from tier to tier to tier. So that's what we're going to dive down into today and break down today. Remember, 80 to 85% are in tier 1. If you're saying that your numbers are smaller, I want you to do some honest self-reflection to say, what is it that I'm not doing academically? What is it that I'm not doing behaviorally that's setting students up for success? We need strong management systems that help prevent students from having those consistent misbehaviors. That's involved in tier 1 support. We need strong and effective lessons that are engaging and that provide student transformation and retention, that are differentiated, because that's going to be in academic tier 1 support. So if we're in tier 1 and we notice that students are consistently scoring, like with all these interventions that are probably in place, the things that you are already doing for everybody, if there are students that are consistently scoring in the bottom 25% of the universal screener data, or they're showing a lack of progress despite the differentiation that you're already utilizing, or they're showing persistent difficulties in key academic skills, then these are indicators that it might be time to move to tier 2. Okay? So they're consistently, I'm not saying they scored less than 25% on a test. If they are consistently scoring in the bottom 25th percentile on the universal screener data, that is a good indicator that this student is missing significant gaps, or there's big gaps with regard to grade level content that they're struggling with. Okay? Now, in those moments, you're still differentiating, because the goal is not, so tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 is not saying that, all right, in tier 1, I'm going to teach the students that are on grade level, everybody below grade level is going to slide to tier 2. That's not how RTI works. There's still differentiation inside of tier 1, because we don't expect students to all be on the same level. So you still have to accelerate the highs. You still have to support the low students. You still have to teach those that are ready. Like, you still have to differentiate within tier 1 support. So we're saying, even with differentiation, if there are students that even with differentiation, they are not showing the progress that the anticipated progress, or that there's a lack of progress, yeah, that might be an indicator that it's time for tier 2 interventions. And again, if they show persistent difficulties in key academic skills. When we say key academic skills, what we mean are those skills that they're going to need to grow on as they are moving through your grade level and beyond. So again, if we're talking about phonics, if we have, let's just say we have a second grader that is struggling with phonics, like, yeah, buddy, we're going to need you to understand how to decode these words so that you can identify them, so that you can define them, so you can comprehend them, so that, like, that is important. So we're noticing that they have gaps in key academic skills, then that is a good indicator that it's time to move to tier 2, okay? So again, tier 1, 80 to 85% of students, and if we're looking at these things, these are the academic triggers. If we're looking at these things, it might be a time for them to start considering what tier 2 may look like. Behaviorally, when we're talking about what tier 2 looks like, again, you have set the foundation with strong management systems, but if we have students that are consistently falling short of that expectation or those classroom expectations, that's when we're starting looking at tier 2 interventions, right? The management system is strong, 80 85% of students is working for it, but there's a couple of students that consistently fall short of the general expectations. That's an indicator that it's time to look at what tier 2 is going to be. And remember, tier 1, that's whole group, that's everybody. Now, tier 2, we'll focus on a smaller group. So now we have some students in tier 2. Those were the indicators, all right? Now we have some students that are inside tier 2. And actually, inside of Impact, there is, inside the course workbook, there's a checklist that details everything that I'm mentioning right now, and that lets you know, okay, this is a good indicator that it's time to move from tier 1 to tier 2, tier 2 to tier 3, and beyond. So that checklist is available inside of Impact for those that are Impact members, okay? So tier 2, again, that's really small group based. All right, that's really small group based. So while they're in tier 2, we're focusing on that small group side of things. That's a more small group focus based off of all the things that we saw. The goal is to move them not down to tier 3, but back up to tier 1, to provide them interventions, for them to see progress, for them to see academic growth, for them to start following along with the classroom expectations, so that we can just bump them back up to tier 1 with everybody else's level of support, where they no longer need that small group intervention. They can just be back with tier 1. That's the whole goal, right? But sometimes there are students that are in tier 2 that even in tier 2, things are not going the way that we expect them to go, even with strong interventions, and they may need to move to tier 3. So we talked about how to go from tier 1 to tier 2. How do we go from tier 2 to tier 3? Here are some indicators that students may be needing to move to tier number 3. Well, after several weeks, I'm gonna pause, I'm gonna wait. I'm gonna pause and I'm gonna wait. After several weeks, I'm saying 6 to 8. After several weeks, the reason why I'm saying this, because I've been in so many systems where there's a student that's fallen short of expectation. So we say we need to refer him to MTSS or RTI. We need to go to tier 2. So he goes to tier 2 support. He's in tier 2 interventions for like a week, and they're like, he's still not working. He might need an IEP. No, that's not how it works. The goal is not to move them down the tiers. The goal is to provide them the adequate support that they need at that tier so that they can be successful and hopefully can scoot back up. So after several weeks, we're talking 6 to 8 weeks of targeted intervention, then if we're noticing that they're still showing minimum progress, right, that they're consistently falling behind, that progress monitoring is showing that that gap is not closing, that's when we can start wondering if it's time for tier 3 interventions. Remember, tier 3 are individualized. So if we're noticing as well significant gaps in the basic skills. So remember, from tier 1 to tier 2, we said in the key academic skills. Now, from tier 2 to tier 3, we're talking about the basic skills. Like, we're talking about the things that you need, the things that you need to be a successful student, not just in my class, but in all. Like recognizing your letters, like knowing your numbers, drawing your numbers in the correct order, like, right? Those types of things, like the basic skills, phonics, number sense, right? The distance from me to the camera, is that 5 feet or is that 500 feet, right? It's more, actually, it's like 2 feet. I'm actually very close. I'm right here. So is that 2 feet or is that 2 miles? Is that 2 feet or is it 200 feet? Like number sense, like, you know what I'm saying? If we're noticing big gaps and the students are like, well, that looks about 200 miles away. No, right? So that is, if we're noticing significant gaps in basic skills, again, progress monitoring, 6 to 8 weeks. Those are the times where we're saying, okay, and now it might be time for a tier 3 type intervention. And that's what we're talking about academically. And if we're talking about behaviorally, if we see an increase in behavioral challenges, they are now on this individualized, or they're now on this behavior tracker. They have a mentor check-in, check-out system, right? We're looking at these things and we're saying, we're actually seeing an increase in behavioral challenges. Behaviors are becoming more severe. Behaviors are becoming more frequent despite the interventions. That's when it may be time to look for tier 3. Not if, you heard what I said, not if they're staying the same. Because somebody's not gonna like to hear that. If they're staying the same, that means that they're in the place that they are supposed to be, which is tier 2. If they're getting worse behaviors, if the behaviors are getting worse, okay, that's when it's time to start looking at tier 3. So tier 1, they're falling short of expectations. So now we're in tier 2, where we have a behavioral contract, we have a mentor check-in, check-out, and if things are staying the same, All right, like we're in tier 2. We're still looking for interventions. We're looking for more ways to really help this student pop back up to tier 1. But if they're getting worse, that's when we're looking at going to tier 3. Okay? So again, for tier 2, from tier 2 to tier 3, academic, we're talking about after several weeks, 6 to 8 weeks, they're still showing minimal progress, or they're consistently falling behind. Progress monitoring showing that the gap is widening. They have gaps in these basic skills. That's when we want to start looking at potentially referring for tier 3 or implementing tier 3 interventions. And if we're talking behaviorally, yeah, their behaviors, they're still the same. 6 to 8 weeks, the behaviors are still the same. All right, they're getting worse. All right, the behaviors are more severe. The behaviors are getting worse. Yeah, now we're looking at going to tier 3, okay? So I want you to notice something here, that data is the biggest driver, not feelings. We don't operate off of feelings, we operate off of facts. We're not saying, I feel like he needs an IEP. I feel like she's not getting it. What does the data say? When you progress monitored, what does it say? What is the chart? Show me the chart, show me the data. What's the bar graph? We operate off of facts, not feelings. When we operate off of facts, what the data actually says, then we can make more informed decisions. So tier 3, now again, this is focused on individualized instruction. It's focused on individualized instruction. And basically, if there is still no progress towards the goal, it could be the indicator that there is a learning disability or some sort of significant challenge that is going to require specialized instruction. And that would then be a referral towards being evaluated for special education services. You still can't say, one of the biggest takeaways I want you to have from this whole course is you still can't say, I think he needs an IEP. I think she needs an IEP. Like you don't have the qualifications to be able to do that. What you can do is you can refer some student to be evaluated for special education services, but you can't say, I think he needs an IEP. 1, we don't operate off of feelings, we operate off of facts. And 2, we go through the full RTI system, the full tier, going through all the progress monitoring and interventions and trying all these things. And then the data might show you that he could be evaluated for special education services. And as we talked about in the first lesson in this course, is like that's now going to take a whole entire team, and we're going to pull the data, we're going to sit down with parents and do all those types of things to see if there needs to be any sort of legal documentation that takes place. Okay, so how do we now refer a student for special education evaluation? Well, if there were multiple cycles of tier 3 intervention, multiple cycles, again, not just one time, but multiple cycles of tier 3 intervention, and there's been little or no response to the tier 3 support. So now we're talking 8 to 12 weeks. Like 8 to 12 weeks we've been going through tier 3 supports, and there's little to no response. They're still missing gaps in the basic skills. They're still falling behind with the progress. They're still in the bottom 25th percentile of the universal screener data. They're still, like, all these things are still happening or getting worse. And the gap is not improving that much or at all. Right? Or behaviorally, again, like there's continuing to show that the behavior is not where it needs to be. So it's still falling short of expectation. We tried tier 2 supports. We tried the tier 3 supports. We got the mentors in here, and we have one-on-one wraparound services and counseling and therapy. We tried all these types of things for consistently over time. Then we can request for an evaluation, okay? So I want you to walk through the process just one more time. Everybody is in RTI, 100% of students. The majority are in tier 1, but sometimes even through our differentiation, even through our strong classroom management system, even through our effective lessons and effective delivery, we still have some students that are going to need some more support. That's where tier 2 comes in. You can listen back to this episode to listen to all the indicators, or look at the checklist that is inside the Impact workbook for those Impact members. But then you go through the checklist to decide if it is time for students to move from tier 1 to tier 2, things like scoring in the bottom 25th percentile consistently and showing those gaps on academic skills. And then from tier 2 to tier 3, if they're showing major gaps on those basic skills like phonics and number sense, or like behaviorally things are not changing or things are getting more severe over time. And then tier 3 to a special ed education evaluation, if cycles of this 6 to 8 week cycles, 8 to 12 week cycles, we're going through this time and time again, we're trying and we're showing little to no progress and behaviors continue to get worse, then we can talk about referring to those special education services, right? So what I want you to take away from all this is do the best that you possibly can in being the best teacher you possibly can be. That is going to involve differentiation. That is going to involve being engaging. That is going to involve properly planning effective lessons. That's going to involve classroom management and all of these things. And as you're doing the very best that you can, if students are not responding, it is the reality, like we just said, there may be a learning disability. There may be a significant challenge that's keeping them from being able to adequately access what it is that you're giving. Don't take on if you're doing everything that we just detailed, don't necessarily feel bad. Don't take it personally that you couldn't reach this student, that you couldn't get to that student, because the reality of the situation is there are some internal things that can keep them away from accessing the thing that you're trying to put out for them. So what I'm saying is, like, there could be that learning disability, right? Honestly, and that's not on you. There could be that significant challenge that's keeping them behaviorally or academically, and that doesn't have to necessarily be on you. So don't take it personally and saying I wasn't good enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not adequate. You are enough. You are enough. And nobody can ask you to be better than your best. If you are honestly saying you're doing the absolute best that you can, and you're going through the system the way that it was designed, and you are setting up students for success, there is still a possibility that there are internal struggles inside of students that are going to keep them from being able to access that general education. And don't take that personally. Just go through the system and love on students, care for students, be the very best that you can for each and every student that you have. That's how you're going to make the impact that you were called to make. All right? So that is our teacher toolbox. Up next, we have our new teacher quick tip, where I give you just one game-changing tip that you can apply in your classrooms right here, right now, to make a huge shift. And that's coming up right after this. Question for you. What are you doing on Tuesday night? The answer could be learning the game-changing formula to take control of your career without waiting on administration, without feeling unsupported, and without spending a whole lot of money. You can join us for our free workshop where we are going to unpack the 3D teacher success formula that's going to teach you the one thing that you have to do to take control of your career and become the teacher you've always wanted to be and make the impact you've always wanted to make. It's right inside of your control. All you have to do is click the link in the description below to register for the free workshop, newteacherbigimpact.com/workshop, and I'll see you on Tuesday night. All right, it's time for the new teacher quick tip of the week, where I give you just one quick tip that you can apply to your practice today to make a huge impact in your classroom. And today we're talking about prioritization, because when we are prioritizing skills, here's what I want to say. Not everything is the most important thing. One of my favorite quotes, I don't remember why I like this thing so much, but it's not even one of my favorite movies. It's cool. But The Incredibles, has anybody ever watched The Incredibles? I watched that movie, not The Incredibles 2 or 3, I don't know how many there are now, but the very first one. I think his name Syndrome. He was the villain that had like the red spiky hair or whatever, and he was the villain in season 1, or in episode 1. What's it called? Movie number 1. He was the villain, right? And I remember he said this one thing. His whole goal in that movie was he wanted to give everybody superpowers. Remember, he wanted to give everybody superpower, remember? And here's what he said. He said, because when everybody is super, no one will be. And I don't know why, as an 11-year-old watching that movie, I don't know why that hit me. I was like, yeah, if everybody was a superhero, nobody would be a superhero, because that would just be normal. And I think the same thing about the tasks that we have on a day-to-day basis inside of our classrooms. If everything is a top priority, then nothing is. Everything cannot be the most important thing. So my game-changing tip for you right now is for you to find a way to prioritize your tasks. For me, I use the Pursuit of Excellence Prioritization Matrix, which is an adaptation of the Eisenhower matrix, which essentially has 4 quadrants. And in the 4 quadrants, we list the things that are of high importance and high impact versus all the way down to things that are of low importance and low impact, or low urgency, sorry. High urgency, high impact, down to low urgency, low impact, and everything in between. Because what it does for me and why it's so helpful for me is I am able to identify a task and be able to decide, okay, is this something that needs to be done right now, right? Something that has high urgency and high impact, yeah, I have to prioritize that thing because it's gonna make a big impact on whatever my mission is, and the deadline is soon. So I'm gonna prioritize that task. Whereas there's something that may be low urgency, low impact, where it says, I don't have to worry about that right now, and it doesn't have that great of an impact, so that's something I can push off till later. But if we just look at a regular to-do list and just kind of knock off items off of our typical to-do list, that is not, and there's no prioritization, that's how sometimes we find ourselves always consistently behind the 8 ball or consistently running because we haven't prioritized tasks, right? Everything seems important, or I gotta do this now, I gotta do that now, I gotta do this now, I gotta do that now. So find your way. I'm not saying that my way is the best way. I'm saying the principle, you know me. I'm gonna teach principles and share strategies. My strategy is the Pursuit of Excellence Prioritization Matrix, which we can link in the show notes. We can link that in the show notes. But it's an adaptation of the Eisenhower matrix, again, which you can Google for yourself. But there's so many different ways that you can prioritize tasks. I know some people have like a one thing method where they say, this is the one thing I'm gonna do today and make sure that this one thing is done and everything else will be okay. I can't subscribe to that one, but there's some others obviously that can. So there are definitely so many different ways that you can prioritize tasks over time. But what I'm saying is you gotta prioritize tasks, because if you just look at all the things that teachers have to do, all the things educators have to do, all the things that administrators have to do, and everything is the same level of importance, you will burn out so fast. You will burn out, listen to me, you will burn out so fast if everything is of high importance to you. So find a way to prioritize, to figure out which things are highly important, which things can wait, so that you can pace yourself out and be able to give time, effort, and energy towards the things that need your time, effort, and energy right now, so that you don't burn out and you take care of yourself. Your wellness is your responsibility. Shout out to Chris Lacey one more time. All right, so that is our new teacher quick tip. And up next is the Teacher's Lounge, not where we're gonna complain about students, not where we're gonna rag on the school culture, not where we're just gonna sit around and fuss, but where we are going to find solutions. And the subscriber question today is about how to find my superpower, the thing that sets me apart. I'll answer that question right after this. What if I told you that the principles that are being taught in this video could be taught to your school community live and in person? Well, the answer is yes. I'm Daryl Williams Jr., and you know that I'm on a mission to help 1 million students be able to live the life that they choose, not the life they're forced to settle for. And I do that by empowering new teachers to have a big impact on student achievement data without burning out, without feeling unsupported, and without changing who they are. So if there's a message that I can empower your students, your staff, your school community with, I would love to pop up in person and make that happen and provide massive value for your school community. Check the link in the description below to fill out a booking form, and somebody from the team will get back to you about how we can work together. Welcome to the Teacher's Lounge, which is the best place to be for you to ask your questions and find the solutions. I've got you. This subscriber question comes from Michelle, and the question is, how do I know what my superpowers are? And I'll unpack that in a second, because we talk about your 1% amazing, or the thing that sets you apart from everybody else. Although 99% of your DNA is what makes you a human, there's 1% that makes you amazing. But some people like Michelle are saying, how do I even know what my 1% is? How do I know what sets me apart and what makes me special? So I'll answer that question right now. And this question was submitted because she is an Impact member. And if you would like your question answered, it's super simple. All you have to do is submit it on a discussion board in Impact. Obviously, first you have to be an Impact member, submit the question. I'll read over it, answer it inside of the community, and also answer it right here, right now. So how do you find your superpower? One of the things that I heard and that I like to say is that sometimes there are things that are obvious to you that are amazing to everybody else. The things that are obvious to you that are amazing to everybody else, those are your superpowers. Because they come so naturally, they come so fluently, they just come to you. And there are some questions that we can ask. I actually have an ebook that is titled My Zone of Excellence that you can find, and we can link that in the show notes as well. And it walks you through the process of understanding what questions to ask yourself to really unpack what sets you apart and what makes you different. The reason why it's hard is because sometimes we know the things that we do, they're just inherent to us, but we can't see ourselves from the outside looking in. So we don't know sometimes that the things that we're doing are incredible or are amazing, because again, they're obvious to us, but they're incredible and amazing to other people. So here's some of the guidelines. What are some of the things that you do that garners praise from other people? Like, other people always say, man, I don't know how you build such great relationships with students. I don't know how you keep your class quiet. I don't know how you communicate with parents like that. I don't know how you consistently get good grades. Like, what is it that people are baffled by that you do consistently, right? Because that is a good indicator that lives inside of your 1%. You can also ask questions like, what are some of the things that come easy to you that are a struggle for others? For me, it's speaking. I can easily speak to the camera, speak in a microphone to thousands of people, doing keynote addresses or professional development trainings. Speaking is something that comes easy to me. I was always a teacher that was called on to do professional development and was excited when I got the opportunity to do it. And there are some teachers in the building that they're like, please never, ever put me in front of other teachers. Like, never do that. And I realized this is something that comes easy to me. And other people are like, I don't know how you do it. I would never want to stand in front of people and speak, right? And that's something that lives inside of my 1% amazing. And also, what are some of the things that if I could never do this again, I would be so sad. If I could never do this again. Again, for me, it's speaking and teaching and training and coaching. Like, if for some reason they said, listen, you can never grab a mic and keynote a conference again, I would be crushed. What is it for you? If they told you that you could never lead the cheer squad again, and they told you that you could never teach math again, if you could never teach middle school, if you could never, what is the thing that if you could never do it again, or not the thing, what are some of the things that if you could never do these things again, it would crush you? That's an indicator that those live inside of your 1% amazing. And one of the ones that I want to add is, what is something that you have mastered recently? Because I think what a lot of people don't realize is the things that you are currently learning are not things that everybody in the world are currently learning. Somebody somewhere said, and I have to fact check this, but somebody somewhere said that if you read a book on a topic, you know more than 90% of the world on that particular topic. If you read a book about a keto diet, you know more than 90% of people in the world about what keto is, right? Because you have the information about it. So that being said, there's something that you learned recently that sometimes we might assume that other people know because we learned it, we got ingrained in it, we got it. But other people, they didn't read that book. They didn't take that course. They didn't listen to that podcast. You know what I'm saying? So they didn't see that interview. They don't know the information that you have mastered. So what is something that you've mastered within the last 2 years? Because that is a great indicator that it's something that you can do well, or at least better than the average person, that the average person cannot necessarily do. So start thinking about these things. I hope that was helpful. Start thinking about these things when trying to find your 1% amazing. Those questions that I asked, as well as what is something that I started doing recently. For me, it's growing the impact community and literally growing a speaking and consulting business. As I speak about it more, when I start talking about it and how to make money online and how to grow a community that people want to be a part of, where we're impacting teachers and impacting students as a result, that teachers want to be there, and they're so excited and engaged, and they're showing up on the membership only exclusive calls and all these things. When I start talking about it, to me, it's so natural now because I've been doing it for the last couple of years. But when I start talking about it to other people, they're like, wow, that's incredible. I would have never thought. You know, when I'm recording videos, like, man, how do you get your videos to look so good? Oh yeah, your podcast, oh man, the short form content, how do you get so many views? How do you get so many followers? I'm like, wow, I didn't realize that I was good at it. It's just something I've been doing for the last couple of years. And there's some things that you've been doing for the last couple of years that you may even feel like you're not there yet. Because when I look at my content, I feel like, oh, I'm not there yet. When I look at the community, it's not there yet. There's still so much more I want for the teachers in the community. I feel like I'm not there yet. But just because you're not where you want to be doesn't mean you're not where you once were. And there's somebody else where you once were that's looking up to where you currently are, and they are in awe. So celebrate yourself, be proud of yourself, but also recognize that that lives inside of your 1% amazing, and that is your superpower. All right, so I don't know why we're on a superhero tip today, but that is a good indicator that that is what your superpower is. Let's land the plane with the exit ticket. Any effective teacher is gonna have an exit ticket or some sort of check for understanding. So let me check for understanding and make sure that you understood our learning objective today inside of the teacher toolbox. And the question is, how do you know when to transition students from one tier to the next? This whole teacher toolbox, we were asking the question, or answering the question, how do we know to go from one tier to the next? Now I need you to answer that in the comment section down below so I can make sure that you got it and paid attention. I'm looking through the data. If it's not where it needs to be, maybe I need to reteach this lesson because I want to make sure that you got it. How do you know when to move from one tier to the next with regards to response to intervention, or RTI, to make sure that all of our students are supported? That's the whole goal. The goal is to make sure that students have what they need in order to be successful human beings, and that you are that teacher that can do that for them. Good teachers are going to teach subjects, but great teachers are going to teach students. The variety of students that show up in your classroom needs you to show up and differentiate and support a diverse group of learners, and you definitely can by mastering the skills that we spoke about here in this podcast today, and looking at the whole entire course inside of Impact, where we're going to help you support your diverse learners and not leave you on an island to figure it out by yourself, but surround you with a community to help support you on your educational journey. Again, the link is in the description below, and I can't wait to see you on the other side. You can get started for free today. Saying all that to say, it is time for us to share the podcast. Who are we going to share the podcast with today? I would say, let us share the podcast with somebody who drives a gas-powered vehicle. It's not an electric car, but somebody who drives a gas-powered vehicle, because they know what it's like for that gas indicator to flash. And they know, remind them, listen, when that gas flashes, get some gas. Other than that, if you don't want to share it, that's absolutely okay. I would love if you comment, if you like, and you subscribe, and the algorithm will share it on your behalf. But share it. Share it would be a good way to get other people inside the community. I want to make sure that you are the teacher you've always wanted to be, that you make the impact you've always wanted to make. That's my mission. That's my commitment. We're going to make it happen. And I'll see you in the next episode.